My name is Ariel Russo. I am the program director here for the Northeast community at Brand Innovators, and welcome to today's Diversity and Inclusion Summit. We will be joined by marketing leaders from Walmart, SAP, Discover, Johnson & Johnson, and many more. So please be sure to ask questions and use the chat to engage with both our speakers and attendees. Without further ado, I'm thrilled to welcome our first speakers of the day. Please welcome Carissa Price, the Vice President of Marketing, Food, Consumables, and Health and Wellness at Walmart, and Carol Vea, the Associate Director of Marketing Ops, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, also at Walmart. The session will be moderated by Debbie Ellison, the Global Chief Digital Officer at VML&Y&R Commerce. Welcome. Hi, Carol.
Hello, excited to be here.
So excited to have you all. Welcome.
Hi, sorry, I had a little Zoom snafu, but I'm here.
Great. All right, Debbie, I'll kick it off to you.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I just had a recording in progress alert. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm extremely honored that I'm going to spend the next kind of 20 minutes with you both. I wanted to introduce our topic for today, the future of marketing is multicultural, and we wanted to explore how Walmart is connecting with its customers. But first off, what I'd love to do, I'd love the audience to get to know you both a little better. So Carissa, firstly, could you share a little bit more about your role in your career journey to get there?
You bet. Sorry.
No worries.
I'm moving around to get better lighting. I'm in a hotel room, so I apologize. Really happy to be here with you all. And so I've had probably a very eclectic journey to get where I am today. I grew up in Idaho in a very small town and ended up going to Harvard and getting a PhD in international political economy. And from there went into strategy consulting. And then from there ended up using my Spanish language skills to work for the largest advertiser in the US Hispanic market for about a decade. And there is really where I got a true business education, I would say, being in charge of everything from strategy to marketing to business development to product development, et cetera. And that really galvanized to me and my experience the importance of understanding your customer, right? Of all aspects of the customer. And so, you know, as a Latina myself and serving the US Hispanic market and then the entire Spanish-speaking world market, an important part of our strategy was to understand the varied customer needs and then design products and services that could help meet those needs. And I think that experience over a decade, we introduced 8 to 9 new products and services over that same time period, really helped me to understand the importance of that approach. And at Walmart, you know, I get a chance to do that. I went and left that company and did my own startup. So as I said, eclectic path, raised money. It was in the healthcare space, which is how I got into healthcare. And so now I've spent about half my career in healthcare and the other half in consumer products and services. And Walmart is just the perfect sort of culmination of those two sets of experiences, because I get to actually bring consumer marketing to healthcare, which was always sort of my passion of, as I used to say, you know, to people in healthcare, Procter & Gamble spends hundreds of millions of dollars to understand how to develop the right laundry detergent with the right scent and the right packaging at the right price point. And yet we treat every person living with diabetes exactly the same. Like, surely we can do better. And so, you know, when a former colleague reached out about the opportunity at Walmart, you know, I jumped at it because as a platform for truly having a positive impact on the US healthcare system, there is no greater platform than Walmart. 150 million people walk through our doors every day. We are where they get their groceries. We are where they get their exercise equipment and clothing, et cetera. And that opportunity to use that platform to nudge people into living their healthiest lives, it just thrills me. It was like, yes, sign me up. I will go to Walmart. And it's been really fun to be back on a consumer marketing floor with people who are using the best practices in terms of marketing to try to influence people, not just on the laundry detergent that they buy, but on all aspects of our daily lives, and particularly to use that to promote wellness in the US is just super exciting. So that's my eclectic path to Walmart and why I love so much what I do today.
I love that, Carissa. It's an impressive career path so far. I absolutely feel that energy already. I'm already pumped up, and it sounds like it's a dream job. As a Latina at a company based in the South, do you feel you bring a unique perspective?
Oh, absolutely. And particularly because I'm a US born Latina, not all Latinas have an accent. And I think that in the South is like hard to compute of like, they can understand people who have an accent. Okay, that those can be Hispanic, but what do you mean? Like you're Latina. And, in some ways it's very startling when I share that with people of like, yes, I do speak Spanish. Yes, I am a Latina. Just because you can't tell doesn't mean that that's not so. And so I think there's that sacred role or function, if you will. And then the other is just to remind people of we all live in our bubbles. And the Hispanic market in the US is extremely varied by country of origin, by native born, not native born, et cetera. And yet, if you look at our demographics as a customer base, Hispanics make up probably the largest, most loyal customers that we have at Walmart. And so it is bringing that understanding and those questions to why are we doing what we're doing? How are we thinking about our processes internally to make sure that diversity and inclusion isn't just about numbers on a page, but how we do business. And I remember, again, one of the first calls I had with the recruiter, the person that was recruiting me in said, we have managed to be the only company who hires non-Spanish speaking pharmacists in Miami. I don't even know how you do that. Like, how do you a non-Spanish speaking pharmacist in Miami? But we did it, right? With no thought to, hey, this is a heavily Spanish dominant market. Perhaps we should recruit for people who can actually look like, sound like, and relate to our customers in this market. So I think that is, sort of the sacred function I bring along with people like Carol and many others who are very committed to diversity and inclusion at Walmart and actually representing that on a daily basis in how we approach the business problems we're trying to solve.
I love that, Carissa. Thank you. I mean, I talk a lot about how we should be helping our clients create more personalized and relevant commerce experiences, right? And to stop thinking of these homogenous groups of people, to your point, Carissa, but actually how you truly understand them, how do you really show up authentically? So let's hold that thought, because we're going to unpack that a little bit in a moment. Carol, welcome also to you. You and I have had a chance to connect already, but for the benefit of our audience, I'd love for you to talk a bit about yourself, your passion, and kind of your career pathway.
Yeah, sure. And I'm reminded constantly that how lucky I am. My journey took me to people like Carissa. We have so many smart, passionate leaders like her on the Walmart team that I just feel really lucky to be here. But I finished my MBA in St. Louis and came to Walmart to work just after that. I spent about 5 years in category marketing. And as a previous cultural anthropologist, it was a really neat experience to work on categories like fishing and hunting and automotive, hardware, things that I knew zero about, and really dig into the data and understand that consumer kind of the same way that I had learned about different cultural groups. So that was a fantastic experience. Went over to product development and private brand strategy at Walmart for a year to really hone my supply chain side that I also, again, it was a gap for me. I then moved to CPG at Del Monte Foods and spent 3 years there, first in shopper marketing and then did sales. Sales was something I never, ever thought I was going to do, but it was a really interesting experience to see the other side, how I would use the marketing data and storytelling and apply it to sales. Learned a ton, but along the way kept realizing that DEI truly was my passion. I started their first ERG, was a founding member of the Diversity Leadership Council there, and just felt that pull in my heart that whether it was marketing or DEI, I knew I had to make a change. And so I started similar to Carissa, but probably not nearly as successfully, started a business on the side doing diversity recruiting consulting. Loved that, but wanted to spend every minute of every day focused on DEI, and the stars sort of just aligned for me for this job back at Walmart, where I am focused 100% on DEI, whatever it is, whether there's a project, a task, a need, an issue. If I can be a DEI advocate, advisor, resource connector, whatever it is, that's kind of my role. So I get to wear a lot of different hats, but focused on our DEI journey all the time. So really happy to be here and to share it with you.
I love that, Carolyn. Honestly, both of you, the breadth and depth of both of your experiences is really phenomenal and really impressive. We could probably spend the next 20 minutes just talking about that. But what I wanted to do is kind of move the conversation on a little bit and talk about kind of that consumer, talk about how Walmart is finding new ways to connect with consumers. Carissa, can you talk about how Walmart thinks about speaking to the multicultural customer, and how's that changed within your business?
Sure, and it's constantly changing, Debbie. I would say part one is grounding in who is our customer, and that varies. Because we have 4,700 stores across the U.S., the answer isn't always the same. But really taking that nuanced approach to understand who is the customer and how do we connect with them. How do we actually bring to life being what I like to coin the center of well-being for every community we serve? And that serves as a North Star, both in the literal sense of understanding the actual communities where our stores are, but also in the sense of the communities that we want to serve across the country. And I think that piece of the diversity inclusion puzzle rests on understanding who is the target customer. And then how do we show up? How do we understand their wants and needs and design the experiences, the products, the services that actually help them live their best lives? And I think, I've learned so much about Walmart since I've been with Walmart over the last 2 years that I didn't know on the outside as a customer. Like all the great things that Walmart does every day to connect with customers that basically haven't been told as a story, right? Haven't been known to the outside. But if you look at those communities, it's what our people and our associates are doing every day on the store level. And so really finding those opportunities of best practices to spread out there. So some of the things, one of the things in my health and wellness portfolio that we've done for about almost 5 years now is something called Wellness Days. And we do it once a quarter, so 4 times a year, in every store across the fleet, where we have free wellness screenings for our customers, our consumers. And we do everything from glucose testing to BMI to vision, you name it, and then give them the results. And again, this has been a service to the communities. It's an opportunity for our pharmacists to come out from behind their counters and actually, talk and connect with people one-on-one. But it's been amazing in terms of the value of helping, again, my personal passion of nudging people to their best selves is because you don't know what you don't know. If you don't go for a regular doctor checkup, if you don't go for a physical annually, you don't actually know what's could be going wrong with you or what you should be paying attention to. And so it really does help sort of connect with customers that this isn't just a place where I buy things. This is a place where I can actually have the help I might need as an individual, as a family, as a community to live my best life. And particularly in rural America right now, there is a crisis in healthcare. There is a crisis in access to just everyday primary care. And so it's one of those ways that we use our platform to connect with our customers in the most primal, essential way, right? And it's now the strategy is how do we take that and make it even more personalized, right? So Debbie's needs in terms of wellness and thinking about wellness aren't the same as Carol's, aren't the same as mine, aren't the same as my mother's or my, a millennial, et cetera. And understanding how do we turn up in those communities in slightly different ways. So if it's an older customer, what are their health screenings and conversations like versus a younger customer who might not have the same, exposure to chronic disease at this point in their life, but is just looking to get back into shape, right? And so taking a nuanced customer-based view onto it first and foremost, to then put those programs out together to be a more personalized approach versus just a one size fits all across America.
And I mean, it's just, I'm just really astounded and so impressed by some of those programs and initiatives, Carissa. And it probably will seem like a silly question, but I want to ask from your perspective, why is it so important for Walmart to create those more relevant personalized commerce experiences? Why are we trying to get to almost that one-to-one connection with the people in the community?
I think it goes back to what is our mission. When Mr. Sam created Walmart, It really was not just a tagline of save money, live better. It was a mantra. And if you go and spend time in Walmart headquarters in Bentonville and throughout the company, people really internalize that of my mission in life, no matter what my role in Walmart is to help my customers save money and live better. And I think over the last few years, that second part of it of live better, how we bring that to life is why we seek those personal connections, why we seek that emotional connection of, are we doing everything we can to use the platform to help our customers and our communities live better? And as we have all lived and breathed, especially over this last year and a half through COVID, right? That connection of community is more important than ever. Like being able to be a place where you can go get organic produce, even in the middle of rural Wyoming, at a price that you can afford and to feed your family, being a place where you can get COVID testing or COVID vaccination or a variety of things that we do every day in our centers. Like there's the commerce part of that, but there's also the personal part of that of, do I trust this retailer? Do I trust this organization to be there truly as an authentic part of my community, or not just someone who's trying to sell me something? And I think that's the great legacy, I'd say, of Sam Walton, is really taking to heart, living those values every day of our merchants work hard to source the products at a price that is competitive, and we do that. But that second piece is equally important of, how do we turn up to help our customers live their best lives, no matter who you are, no matter where you are in the US.
Absolutely. And that positive impact that you are playing to help people better their lives, help communities kind of better, be much more informed, and going just beyond product, Carissa, and into services, I think is really phenomenal. And connecting that in terms of how you reach those consumers, how you reach those communities. Of course, there's a role for marketing to play a role in that, right? And Carol, I wanted to explore with you the role of DE&I within marketing over in Walmart. And you've recently added a dedicated DE&I headcount in marketing. Can you explain to us kind of why that was important to do?
Yeah, sure. It is so important. As we all know, there are so many DEI advocates, like the three of us, that end up doing DEI on the side. It's a volunteer, obligation, really. But it's a side job for so many. And as the work gets really busy, as it does, then any of those side jobs kind of drop off. And so it's really exciting that Walmart has made this a dedicated role, because it is my job all day, every day. And so it's never going to fall off as a side job. And for us, we're putting out so much creative on a daily basis, on an annual basis, that we need the extra attention to it. And so we do a lot of different things to ensure that we're doing the right thing. And, that message of living better comes through and is trusted, especially when our customers see themselves in our work. And so we have a lot of systems and processes and strategies in place to bring that to life. One of the things we do is we have a creative review board. Again, it's a team of volunteers, so it is second to their day job, but it's something they're passionate about. And they review all of our work. It's a diverse group of associates, and they're looking at all of our work, every single piece of creative, to determine, is it representative both of our customer base, but also our associate base? And when we do represent our customers, are we doing it in an authentic way? Are we being culturally sensitive? Are we putting diverse characters in positions of power in the creative? And so that has been really impactful. And I don't think we could make that happen if we didn't have this dedicated resource on a day-to-day basis.
I really like the sound of that. And it's definitely something that we've been talking about here over at VMLY and our commerce is, how can we ask intentionally those questions of ourselves and of the work that we produce. And I think it's really interesting that you've kind of come up with kind of the same type of kind of intervention to some of the things that we're doing. And so, Carol, what does success look like for you in the D&I space of media and marketing, and how do you track progress? How do you hold yourself to account?
Yeah, I mean, just as DEI is a journey, I'd say our tracking process is a journey. We certainly do have some quantifiable goals in terms of agency representation, behind the camera representation, and media. But then when we think about representation in creative, we're still working through that process. We are constantly checking ourselves and course correcting as needed to make sure that we're representing. But when you think about success, I mean, there is no endpoint to DEI. But if I could work myself out of a job in the next 2 years, because DEI goes from being an initiative within Walmart marketing to being a mindset among every single associate on the marketing team, I mean, that would be golden. And we do that by bringing up DEI in leadership discussions, in every brief discussion, adding training. And so Carissa will attest, there's so much training related to DEI. You can't make it to all of it, but if you make it to half of it, you'll learn something. And we're all learning as we go. So eventually, I'd like to say there would be some endpoint, but we know there never will be. We're constantly learning on this journey together.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think what we've spoken about today in terms of DE&I really being a business imperative, as Carissa was saying, in terms of affecting people in communities, and then also that business transformation internally. Carol, everything that you're talking around goal setting and the creative review board and all of those good things. One of the areas I'd love to pick up on, actually, Carol, was what you were saying was kind of you've got your day job, and then you've got this is beyond the day job, right? And I think I'm hoping the audience who've tuned in today can hear that passion in both of your voices. All three of us have been doing a lot when it comes to our business and outside of the business. And I'd like to ask the both of you, what else do you do outside of work to advocate for DE&I, and why is it important to you personally to be active in that space? So Carissa, can we ask of you that question?
Sure. And I think it's a great question that we could always all do more. An example of, when Carol asked me, could I do this? I was like, yes. I mean, I didn't equivocate, I would do it. And then, work interfered I needed to go to Chicago, which is why I'm in this hotel room. But I made sure I arranged my travel so that I could still be on and do this. And it's a little thing, but I think, again, it goes to mindset. So I also mentor, and I'm a member of our Latinx officer caucus at Walmart, as well as our resource group, and really keep an eye out for how do I help the Latinos and Hispanics in Walmart have the best career possible. And a lot of that is just bringing, visibility to the great talent that we have. But Walmart, like so many organizations, all organizations, is about relationship. And so how am I using relationships to try to make sure that people of color have the visibility and the career opportunities that they're seeking, right? And that I'm a promoter of that. I also mentor and have a mentoring circle with another Latina in merchandising in Walmart, and bringing up that next generation of helping to position them. And, those opportunities to learn from people who have been perhaps a little bit more successful or just further on the journey, right? And reaching back and saying, how do you teach someone how to give a presentation when you're presenting to officers or leadership, right? How do you help them network to get known to be up for that next promotion or up for that special project? So I think all of those, that takes time, right? It has to be a mental thing of, I'm going to do this. And then last, but certainly not least for me, I remember being that little Latina girl in Idaho in a small town where, my high school guidance counselor, you had to fill out this form and have this one-on-one, and where we were going to apply to college. And so I had Stanford, UC Berkeley, and Claremont McKenna. And he looked at me and said, well, I don't understand why you're not applying to the community college down in Twin Falls. It's a perfectly good school. And I just looked at him and said, Mr. Olson, with all due respect, I want to go to a top law school. And if I want to go to a top law school, then I need to go to a top university. And that's why I'm applying to these. Like, that was his vision for me. That's all he could think about. And so I give back a lot to the local high school in my small town, and any time I have a chance to help with young kids, because math is so important, for example. Well, math is something that women underrepresent, but they don't know when you're in grammar school, when you're in middle school, when you're in high school, when it starts to get tough. In a lot of cases, there was no one to tell me, like, the reason why you need to keep doing algebra is because if you want to do X, Y, and Z in the future, you need that math base. And so I want to be that voice in these kids' lives to say, hey, keep up with math. I know you don't get its practical application now, but guess what? If you want to be an architect, if you want to be an engineer, if you want to be a programmer, if you want to do any of these things, math is the basis to that. And so stick with it, because there's not, in a lot of cases, anyone else in their life that's going to give them that message, that's going to tell them, to inspire them to keep going in these important baseline things that create that springboard for opportunity later on in life. And so that's how I personally choose to do it and what my personal passions are. But I think we all need to find our own paths of how do we help inspire, give back, reach back, and give someone a chance to get to that next level.
I can really relate to that, Carissa, like really relate to that in the sense of, you know, thinking back to your younger self and what you could have, you know, the help that you could have got, and the support and the inspiration and the nudge towards being a little bit more ambitious and pushing yourself a little bit more. And it's not my place to say thank you, but thank you for doing that. And anyone that's on this call that feels, you know, that they might want to do that, please lean in and don't wait for it to happen. Just reach out to people within your own organization, business, network that you feel could do with some of your wisdom, some of your experience. I think it's so important to share that and to be really authentic and transparent with that experience. And to, as everything you were saying, Carissa, you know, people have to see it to be it, right? And I do feel as leaders that sometimes we have to take ownership and responsibility for doing that. Carol, I'd love to hear a bit about you and kind of what you do in your spare time, if you have any, and some of the roles that you're playing in D&I outside of the Walmart space.
Yeah, sure. And I totally agree. I love the power of networking. I've benefited so much from it and can encourage others to as well. Sort of related to Carissa and the investment in the youth, I'd say my most important on the side job is raising my two daughters to be kind, open, you know, caring kids and hopefully adults who do treat everyone with respect. And so I do a lot of cultural learning so that, you know, we do live in Bentonville, Arkansas, not as much diversity as I would like, but we can expose our kids through books and movies and very intentional activity. So I do a lot of that for sure. I am also an executive co-chair of Network of Executive Women in Northwest Arkansas. We have about 1,400 members, but our mission is to get equality in the workplace, gender equality specifically for all women. So we tie into groups like Latinx and other organizations to ensure we are driving equality for all women. So I love doing that. I'm also on the Diversity and Inclusion Council for the city of Bentonville. We would love for Bentonville to be the most welcoming place on earth. We've got some work to do, but we are making progress there. So I'm really excited about that. But I do think that time investment you referenced is really the most important. You know, I'll never turn down a connect related to DEI. We can always learn something from each other. And so I find myself doing that on a very regular basis across the industry.
That's phenomenal, Carol. And I'd like to, you mentioned kind of gender equality, which I think is super interesting. In your kind of, across the span of your career, have you started to see an increase of women in the industry, especially at higher levels? Are you starting to see that impact?
I have. I mean, I do think there's still a lot of room for growth at those higher levels. You know, across the industry, it feels like we're doing a great job bringing in the talent. And then we've got awesome leaders like Carissa at the top levels. I think that, and I think it's not just about gender, but diversity in general. We need to be really intentional about developing the talent all the way through the career life cycle, if you will. And Walmart's doing some really neat things in that space from a marketing perspective, like investing in Ad Fellows, Verizon's program to build a diverse talent pipeline, as well as Brand Lab and many others. But there's always so much more we can do, for sure. Krista, do you have thoughts on that one?
I do, and I think it's an especially pivotal time right now across corporate America and America in general, because women were particularly hard hit by COVID, right? And the loss of women in the workforce at all levels, I think, is a problem for all of us to deal with. But I think it also highlights the perennial problem that's always been there of women as caregivers, women as in that role, that what we sacrifice in order to step into those roles or to do those roles often is career. And this is a problem that predates COVID, obviously. But think that corporate America in general has figured out a way to solve that in ways that don't negatively impact whoever's choosing to step out to be a caregiver, whether it's a man or a woman, in ways that actually work for us as a society, right? That don't have that cost on the career side. But I think it's a meaty question that maybe his time has finally come for everyone to really engage in as we talk about going back to work and we talk about going back to the office, if you will. What does that look like? What does flexibility actually look like and mean? And how do companies organize the work and challenge some of those status quos of, in the Women's Officer Caucus at Walmart, we've been having listening sessions, and most women, regardless of sort of where they are geographically in Walmart's workforce, et cetera, we talk about as modern ways of working, of like, COVID has taught us that you don't have to be in the office to be effective. You don't have to be in the office. In fact, you can be more efficient and effective working at home through Zoom. And don't get me wrong, there's all the negatives of Zoom life that you can do. But I think it's an opportunity perhaps that we haven't had before to redefine ways of working in the modern world, right? That aren't tied as tied to physical based place, and don't put a premium on that face time of being in the office, which so often then conflicts with, I've got kids, I've got elders, I've got, all these activities. And how do we as a company, how do we as a society want to organize that work in better ways that serve everyone? I don't think it's predominantly been a woman's issue, if you will, but I don't think it is. I think it's a societal issue that we have an opportunity to try some new things out because we've learned through COVID that you can do it differently.
I completely agree. I love everything that you're saying around, this is a societal issue. It isn't just an issue for women. It's the symptoms and the impact is impacting women. But actually, when we talk about gender equality, we should be talking about inclusivity and how everyone benefits from gender equality. I think that's super important. Ladies, I could honestly speak to you all day. I'd like to thank both of you. I realize that we've kind of hit timing. I'd like to thank both of you for spending this time with me today. Carissa, thank you for giving us a bit of a tour of your hotel room. Really appreciate it.
Whoever asked the question, it's a Spring Hill Suites by Marriott. It just looks spacious, I promise you.
I think there was actually a question that was asking.
I saw it.
Honestly, it really is beyond impressive that you are championing DE&I transformation, not only within your business, but outside of that too. Thank you for all your additional efforts that go beyond just the day job. I really hope that we're able to speak again soon, because I can't wait to hear what will happen over the next chapter. Brand Innovators team, I'd love to know whether I could take some quick questions from the floor. Yes. Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'll just grab a couple of them. One of which I actually wanted to ask myself is, how do you define purpose-driven marketing and how are you bringing it to life? One of the things that we talk about and I'm really passionate about is how do we bring purpose into commerce, and we're seeing more and more consumers really make their decisions about purchasing through their values and through the purpose of brands. Either of you, do you want to comment on that particularly?
Carol, you want to go first?
It makes me think of a conversation we had just earlier this week. Totally agree. Purpose-driven or purpose-based decision, the consumer decisions are, more and more important. And so we have to kind of think about those tied back to our Live Better mission on an everyday basis. And so when we do showcase diversity in our advertising, when we talk about some of the great things Carissa had mentioned that maybe we haven't given enough visibility to, while they are great for sales, they also actually help consumers make good decisions for their family. And so the combination of both is certainly the direction we're heading, and it doesn't just benefit Walmart, but it benefits our consumers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, so much opportunity in that space, Debbie, and so much innovation. So it's public now, so I can talk about it openly, but Mrs. Obama has a program that she launched on Netflix called Waffles and Mochi. And it's essentially, the Sesame Street of food. But the purpose underneath it is to try to encourage families with young kids to cook more at home and to cook healthy meals. And it's done through a very entertaining format. So they approached us last year to say, can we partner with you? Because part of this is not just inspiring them through the show, but also providing access to affordable, healthy foods that families can eat across America. And so, of course, we jumped at the opportunity to partner with them, and we just launched it at the beginning of May. And it's a multi-faceted campaign. So there's a digital experience with waffles and mochi that we built out, which then through those recipes, you can put that into your cart and shop at Walmart. But the reason why they came to Walmart, right, is because of that part of the work that we do on Save Money, is that families, actually working families, can afford to buy that fresh produce at Walmart. They can afford to make those rather than it being something that's just out of reach. And so I look at that campaign, and there's also an aspect of Roundup at the cash registers all of the month of May, where you can choose to make a donation to the Pass the Love campaign. And that last part of it, the Pass the Love campaign, is actually providing that same experience through food banks across America. So no matter where you are on the socioeconomic spectrum, you can participate in this movement to eat healthier and have a healthier lifestyle. And I just think that's the opportunity. It's good for commerce. It's good for the country. It's good for families. It's good for the planet. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can put it all together into something that's also fun and exciting just for kids to watch and participate in and cook, right? So Waffles and Mochi, check it out on Netflix for fun.
I am so checking that out. It sounds amazing. It sounds really awesome. And actually, Carissa, I love that, because that for me is the real definition of inclusion, right? It isn't just that we can watch the same programs together, but we can all act off the back of that content and be connected to products and services that are right for me. And to your point, right for my socioeconomic, status. And honestly, that is definitely, I'm going to call my son, and that's definitely going to be on our watch list, I think. One of the questions I'd love to ask you, Carol, from the floor is, what's the biggest internal challenge to achieving DE&I initiatives?
We want to do so much. There's just not enough time and resources. As an example, in any one spot, we can only show so many customers or associates. And we want to do it all. We want everyone to feel truly seen in our work, feel connected to the brand. And sometimes that means seeing themselves in the work. And so there's just not enough time or space to do it all. And so we think a lot about intersectional diversity as well to help improve that. But that will be something we're constantly chasing. Fortunately, we're in a position where we have very, very, very strong DEI support at Walmart. From a corporate perspective, but also within marketing. And so that lays a nice foundation. And then it's just, is there enough time in the day to do, everything we want to do?
I can really relate to that, Carol. Absolutely. There are so many things that we'd like to get involved in, that we'd like to do. There isn't just enough hours in the day, and sometimes you have to assess the impact that you'll have through some of those initiatives and programs, and everything both of you were saying around how can we reach more people more authentically in a much more kind of connected and personalized way is really what we should all be aiming for. Again, I'd like to thank you both. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. Thank you to everybody that's tuned in. I hope you've enjoyed the session just as much as I have. Really look forward to connecting both with you again very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into that amazing session. It is so encouraging to see Walmart have such a big push for diversity and inclusion, and I'm looking forward to having you all on the stage again. With that, I will bring on our next two speakers. We have another amazing session planned for you all today. The session will be welcomed with Sarah Jook, the Director of Purpose and Brand Experience at SAP. The session will be moderated by Melissa Chow, the Regional Account Director at Quantcast. Hello.
Hi.
How are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Sarah. All right. Well, I will kick it off to you, Melissa.
Great. Sarah, can you hear me?
Hi, there we go. Sorry about that.
Hey. Great. So as you just heard, I'm Melissa Shao, Regional Account Director at Quantcast. For those unfamiliar, Quantcast is a global ad tech company that's created this new intelligent audience platform that really empowers brands, agencies, and also publishers to really know and grow their audience. I'm joined today by Sarah Jook, Senior Director of Purpose and Brand Experience at SAP. And we're here to talk about the very important topic of how brands can make diversity and inclusion part of their company DNA. So before we jump in, Sarah, could you please share just a bit about what you do in your current role, Senior Director of Purpose and Brand Experience? What does that really mean?
Hi, yeah, thanks, Melissa. We're really seeing that being in business is about more than just generating a profit. And as a technology company at SAP, we see that, a real core aspect to why we exist is how we can help the world run better, how we help businesses with innovation, and through that process together, we can create the kind of positive economic or environmental or societal impact when we collaborate in that way. So my team is really focused on how we communicate that on behalf of the brand. And this idea really that our CEO has really leveraged as a really core part of our messaging is really how do we make sustainability profitable and make profitability sustainable, because we think that we can do that in partnership together. So my team really helps communicate that as part of SAP's vision for purpose and sustainability. And diversity and inclusion are really important aspects of how a business walks out that purpose and how we maintain that level of resilience in responding to the market. So looking forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. I want to just kind of piggyback on that last thing that you said and have you go a little bit deeper. Why do you think more and more businesses like SAP from the top levels of leadership are broadening their business outcomes beyond profits and really putting an emphasis on diversity and inclusion?
Well, I'll go back to a couple of years ago, something that Larry Fink wrote, and Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, one of the large asset management firms. And, he really kind of elevated this concept when he said that, a company cannot achieve long-term profits without embracing purpose, because there's really a strong sense of purpose and commitment to stakeholders that helps a company connect deeply to its customers. And when you do that, you're able to adjust to changing demands in society. So recognizing that, purpose is really a big central part of what a business needs to, exist around. And so purpose can be associated with, efforts around environment or society or governance impacts, but it was also highlighted in some references in Harvard Business Review when companies were really managed for the long term in line with big trends like diversity and inclusion, they became more resilient. They were able to have this ability to react and respond and grow their company in relation to their market. So managing and fostering that kind of culture of accountability around diversity and inclusion, those kinds of practices will really pay off in what is called the diversity dividend. So that was also the subject of some research that Paul Gompers published a couple of years ago that looked at investment performance. He looked at venture capitalists and the kinds of partnerships that they were creating in their investment. When the partners were really similar, there was lower investment performance. So it demonstrated that diversity and inclusion were a part of contributing to company performance. And McKinsey also published research about 2015, which they then updated about 3 years later. And they looked at really gender and ethnic or cultural diversity. And through their research, validated, in 2 rounds of research over the years, companies that were in the top quartile, essentially, for gender and ethnic diversity, they're far more likely to have above average profitability and value creation overall. So the research was showing that companies with this greater diversity, they have access to broader talent, helps them, source talent, help them compete in a changing world. There's less bias or less kind of group think in the way that decisions are being made. And in a company that serves a diverse customer base, having a diverse team at that company can really increase innovation and increase the customer insight in that too.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And I really like that term that you brought up, diversity dividend. So on that vein, what is SAP doing to create an open and inclusive environment for employees?
Yeah, it's a really interesting place to be at of my career. SAP is a German-based company, but 100,000 plus employees worldwide. And we have employees from over 150 different nationalities. One of the things we have, and I know other companies have something similar, but we have over 80 employee network groups or employee resource groups. These groups help people find community and connection. They help create kind of safe places to explore issues. And there's an executive sponsor behind every employee resource group. Sometimes they can raise issues that then get fleshed out and brought to broader visibility in the company so that they can be addressed. So there are groups for Blacks at SAP, Latinos, Pan-Asians. There's a business women's network group that I'm a part of, and we have geographically based chapters that provide a place to meet up in person as well, and not so much this past year, unfortunately. But they're a place for kind of celebrating the uniqueness that people bring. Oftentimes the celebration of that can be orchestrated across the company so that you create more empathy across other employees. So we can celebrate things like Black History Month together with this employee network group, and they are places for education and transparency around various topics, and really broadening the perspective across all of the company because of what these employee resource groups can do. And of course, they also create some networking opportunities in and of themselves. So one of the newer initiatives at SAP that I think is really exciting as far as bringing a spotlight onto inclusivity is addressing mental health and well-being. Mental health is kind of one of those topics that has had a certain stigma associated with it, but when you empower people to really be their best, even through working through those mental health challenges, you really can create an environment that raises people's long-term ability to contribute to the business too. So there, estimates for productivity loss just due to mental health, companies worldwide, like $1 trillion a year. But and depression, we know, can interfere not only with the physical tasks, but of course the cognitive tasks too. So by bringing and kind of normalizing a little bit of the mental health issues, that we can begin to destigmatize those challenges that people have. One of the things that SAP has done is not only for our employees, we've recently had a mental health day, because of course the pandemic really
raised the level of stress and the potential for mental health issues. But also SAP has created some offerings around mindfulness and fitness and things to help people address those issues in their life. And it's not only for SAP employees. One of the things that I think is really interesting when companies can bring these issues out into the broader ecosystem, we partnered with an organization called Search Inside Yourself Institute, and we have a global mindfulness practice with them. We've also partnered with Thrive, and we have also some specific technology solutions that can help companies assess their employees, their well-being, you know, their state of wellness across their employee base too. So it's really, I think, one of those more emerging areas in terms of companies being very transparent in helping employees and addressing mental health as one of those topics around diversity and inclusion. Maybe Melissa, do you have examples from what you've experienced, you know, at your company, ways that, you know, your company or ways that you've seen that have really exemplified diversity and inclusion too?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so great to hear all of the steps that SAP is taking to really make their employees feel like they're working at a company that really prioritizes diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's certainly a priority for Quantcast as well. There are a myriad of resources and tools available for employees. We don't quite have 80 employee resource groups yet, but we do have ERGs as well, including Pride Alliance at Quantcast. We also have a Quantcast Women's Network, which is abbreviated to QWN and aptly shortened to Queen. And we also have a Parents Network, which I think is fantastic. And we also have regional inclusion networks for some of our regional offices in EMEA. And then we also have a diversity leadership at Quantcast, which really brings together underrepresented people of color and their allies at Quantcast. And they focus on community activities and advocacy and those sort of presentations. So I think that's really great because it's so important for companies to really foster these voluntary employee-led groups. And it really helps demonstrate, you know, it's important for us to create a diverse and inclusive workplace. It aligns with this organization's values and our goals. And I think something you mentioned is it also increases employee engagement as well. And it helps groom potential future leaders too. I've seen at my company, there are employees who are leading ERGs that typically wouldn't get that much face time with ELT, for instance. They now have more exposure and, you know, have taken on even maybe somewhat of like a mentee kind of role, which is really valuable. So definitely have seen a lot of great work coming out of our diversity, equity, and inclusion org. I'm curious, what is SAP doing to not only retain talent by creating open and inclusive structures for existing employees, but also recruiting a diverse talent base?
Right. Yeah, so thinking about, you know, how do employees even get here, right? We've really been trying to broaden the places from which we look for talent. And just, you know, a couple of examples, we've worked with, in a partnership with a number of the historically Black colleges and universities, or HBCUs, and we help teach SAP software in those environments. We have SAP University Alliance program as well, and really trying to broaden the talent pool from where we seek to attract employees from. We also have a fairly unique program that is about neurodiversity and addressing autism and people on the autistic spectrum. How do we, bring their talent to bear in this space too? So this was launched about 8 years ago, and at SAP we bring in, people on the autism spectrum that they get a chance to kind of do some pre-employment training, and it gives them an opportunity to demonstrate their skills and abilities in ways that are not the traditional interview, which sometimes people on the spectrum, a traditional interview may not be the best way for them to demonstrate their capabilities. And it really helps, improve our ability to have their wealth of talent and, provide mentorship within this program so that they can move into job placement after, a period of kind of training. And we've had some success with this program. We've also created really kind of a business roundtable for other companies to share best practices in this way. So it really gets better outcomes for companies. It's obviously better outcomes for autistic students, and helping us attract that kind of diverse talent. So I think it's really important for companies, when you think about diversity and inclusion, to embrace where you get talent from as a part of those considerations too.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's incredible. I think that's fantastic. I think it's really great when you see companies really investing in the growth of their employees, and also supporting their employees with continued learning and training, regardless of their role or where they are in their career. Can you share what your company has done in terms of how it approaches continued education opportunities for its workforce?
Yeah, I think, as employees come in, and as you have kind of the arch of your career, there's so much transformation happening. Digital transformation is just accelerating on so many levels, and that means there's really an increased need for addressing skills, ongoing skills readiness, but even just how do we think about enabling skills for the future. And we have to accept that, the way people learn is changing, and there's a lot of, diversity in the way that we want to create learning opportunities that are, say, non-traditional. And we have actually an executive level position at our company around learning, and not only for employees, but in our broader ecosystem, for our partners, for customers. And this kind of approach to learning for life is really about looking at the skills that will be needed for a digital future. How do we lower the barriers to learning for anyone, anywhere? And we have a massive online course, or a MOOC, called Open SAP. There's a ton of free classes, flexible, accessible learning certifications that can be earned through that. I mentioned the university programs that we also run. But we also partner around youth programs to worldwide try to reach skill development in underserved areas. So we partner with UNICEF to kind of try to activate the potential skills and learning in readiness in various parts of the globe. So I think, we know there's going to be an emerging skills gap, and the way that we can work together with organizations, with governments, with nonprofits to really help address that will benefit not just SAP, but our entire ecosystem as well.
That's incredible. Yeah. So it sounds like SAP is really doing a lot to support their existing employees, and also, the way that they approach recruiting. And then you mentioned also the way that SAP is supporting other businesses is also, there's thought put in there around how to make it diverse and inclusive. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this is an area where I think, I'm incredibly proud about the ways that SAP is investing in this, not just, from a, creating awareness, but actually creating real opportunities in a broader ecosystem of business, ways that we're helping other businesses to thrive by addressing diversity and inclusion topics. And these are creating win-win scenarios for all the parties involved. So for example, there's a relatively new program that was launched at the beginning of this year for SAP employees to serve as consultants for other smaller businesses. It's a pro bono type activity for economic equity. So companies, perhaps minority-owned companies, things like that could apply into the program. If SAP employees worked as consultants over a period of 6 weeks to help provide the kind of consultative work, whether it's design thinking activities or leadership opportunity, leadership development kinds of work together. So SAP employees get to give back in a real contribution that they can make. But we also are directing specific investment around diversity. We have a social procurement pledge that is called 5 and 5 by 25. We're directing procurement spend to diverse and social enterprise suppliers. So 5% of addressable procurement to social enterprise, 5% to diverse owned businesses by 2025. So it's about the ability to really kind of transform, some of the industries, help, really kind of lift up some of these businesses and grow them, and part of a program to have that kind of integrated social enterprise impact with diversity and inclusion. So just like we do with our own personal spending as consumers, right? Businesses can also do in supporting that kind of diverse and inclusive culture of innovation. So it's exciting.
That's really exciting. That's amazing. I feel like it's hard for us to have this conversation without the pandemic coming up at some point. The challenges of COVID in 2020 really elevated a focus on some issues related to diversity and inclusion. And these issues, they had been present, they were there, but the crisis really pushed up the visibility. And one fact is over 2 million women left the workforce last year in 2020. How do you think businesses can respond to this?
Yeah, things have really been shaken up, I think, right? And I think it's been a watershed moment where people are looking at what brands are, how brands are responding. People are looking for authenticity and real action, not just platitudes or slogans or things, right? So again, there's some investment here that SAP is making to help address some of these inequities that I think are really, really interesting, innovative ways of partnering around this. One partnership that we've done is with an organization called Hey Mama. And Hey Mama provides resources for working women, many of them entrepreneurs who are, doing the juggle, right, of supporting, their dual roles. So Hey Mama provides some professional growth and advancement, mentoring, some professional networking, and it helps support the future of work for mothers. And SAP is providing a grant for 100 early stage entrepreneurs to have a 1-year membership in that network. We also have an internal innovation investment venture, kind of like our own venture capital kind of investment internal to SAP. Well, we have a program within this innovation group to accelerate over 200 startups that are either female or underrepresented founders by 2023. So through this incubation program with SAP, these founders get access to the resources and mentoring and consultative services that this investment group can support them with. McKinsey has estimated that really working now to advance gender equality can add trillions of dollars to GDP over the next 10 years. And like we were talking earlier with some of the research, some of the more diverse leadership teams that you can have, even in a venture stage, they'll achieve much higher revenue from that innovation. Lastly, more on kind of the ethnic diversity, racial diversity focus, another commitment that SAP has made is in a program that we stood up last year called Spotlight Black Businesses. And this is part of our commitment to helping fight some of the injustice, some of the racial inequality. And we know that Black-owned businesses suffered a lot under the pandemic, disproportionately so in some ways. So we had a program where SAP employees could nominate Black-owned businesses from their local communities in North America. And we would help promote those businesses through our own social media, and in some cases, even our own advertising dollars to support these small Black-owned businesses. So, using our platform, we've highlighted over 50 businesses already, and add advertising support for over 20 of them. So these are some of the ways that we're really trying to respond to the inequities that are out there, putting real investment behind the topic, and ultimately seeking to build bridges around success for these areas of gender and ethnicity.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think all of these that you mentioned, Hey Mama, the No Boundaries, the Spotlight Black Business Program, these are all really, really great steps. And it must make you really proud to work for a company that really makes this a priority.
Yeah, it's really it's great to be a part of an organization that is really trying to put action behind the words, right? And I think the future is going to require that in a big way, that we recognize the inclusivity, recognize the diversity across talent and leadership, and really foster the cultural openness that needs to be a part of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the future, this is a really broad question, but the future of work has been really a big topic, and it's incredibly top of mind, especially now. I'm constantly seeing articles swirling around on LinkedIn about the future of work. What do you think the future of work looks like?
Yeah, I think, we know that, like we spoke before, the diversity dividend, right? Like, in order to really maintain or achieve success, we have to address diversity and inclusion, and we have to do it at every step in the process, right? So, one of the problems that companies face is in the traditional ways of recruiting and hiring and developing and promoting people. Humans are predisposed to sort of favor others who look like themselves. So, there are technologies that can help mitigate some of this. As a technology company, of course, I'm interested. I think there's going to be the potential for artificial intelligence to help counter some of the bias that exists along this whole spectrum of hiring and retaining, et cetera. But artificial intelligence can help take the bias out of some of these processes. It's not a cure-all, it's not a panacea for everything here either, though, because companies have to work to really avoid some of the pitfalls from using bad data. Artificial intelligence is, founded on the data that you feed it, right? So I think the absence of diversity, especially in leadership of big companies, is well documented, but companies that succeed at creating that more diverse workforce, they'll need to take some real deliberate steps to do that. But I think the evidence is clear that there are rewards for doing that. And SAP has some goals as well for women in leadership. We have 2 new women leaders on our management board within the last year. So that's exciting. And I think it really starts with understanding the landscape of your workforce, addressing the hiring process, and then having a culture of accountability and transparency. So, yeah. So I'll, ask you, Melissa, you can wrap it up too. Like, what makes you optimistic about diversity and inclusion in the future?
Yeah, so there's this growing trend for companies to set transparent targets and goals and D&I initiatives, which I find really promising. And roles like yours that did not exist previously are now being prioritized by companies, right? So I think that's fantastic. And we touched on this a bit earlier. I think the pandemic really triggered some conversations around mental health of professionals across the globe, really. Burnout is a really real thing. So I think another relevant diversity and inclusion trend this year that makes me optimistic is organizations really taking intentional steps to support mental health, the mental health of their diverse pool of talent. My company has also started mental health days. And so, every other month or so, we have a day off. And I know for me, it makes a big difference. So I'm excited to see these trends continue, and I'm optimistic.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we actually, we are getting towards the end of time here, and we actually have a couple questions directed to you specific to SAP. So Dave Edwards is asking, how is SAP benchmarking DEI data of their existing marketing agencies?
Yeah, and I'd have to, look at some of our specifics in, we have an annual report that we do produce around some of it relating to spending, and we have a buying network. It's where we procure a lot of the services that we have. I mentioned this 5 and 5 by 25 pledge, where we want to, of our discretionary spending, increasing the proportion of that spend that goes toward minority-owned businesses or businesses that also have a social enterprise focus. So we are measuring that with real spend as well. And I think we're trying to make sure that we leverage the investments that we make, not only in marketing, but even across other categories of procurement, whether it's office supplies or other business services that we engage with as well.
Great. Dave is also curious, how is SAP ensuring proper DEI portrayal in communications?
Yeah. And this one's always, I think, trying to bring authentic diversity across, whether it's the imagery that we use, the language, the messages that we have, what we use. We actually have a campaign around our employee branding, around the ability for people to come to SAP and maximize their potential. We're running that campaign with our employees, with representation across our employee base. So, as a global company, there's a lot of representation from various, ethnic groups, a lot of different, diversity. So trying to make sure that we portray that in the kinds of communications that we run, and like I said, even in the language that we use. The benefit of being a company that has operations in a lot of different parts of the world, you will get pushed at times for people to, kind of say, hey, what about this or that, that doesn't translate well. That's not very inclusive of these cultures. So there's a lot of accountability that we get just, again, by having teams with that kind of diversity baked in to our leadership too.
Absolutely. Great. So Sarah, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think we're close to time here. I don't think I see any other questions, but it's just been really wonderful to hear about all that SAP is doing to foster a diverse and inclusive environment.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. It's interesting to hear your perspective too, and I've enjoyed it, so thank you.
Awesome.
Hello. Well, thank you both so much. We've had many SAP leaders come onto the stage and talk about such important topics. So it's great to see that SAP is thinking about diversity and inclusion on such a large level. So thank you again, Melissa and Sarah, and have a wonderful day. With that, I will bring on our next session for the day. We have another exciting group of speakers for you all. Please welcome Jennifer Burns, the head of talent, brand, and global brand marketing of events and communications at Discover Financial Services. The session will be moderated by Vanessa McCullers, the VP of DE&I at Ben. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Ariel. Hi, Vanessa. Nice to see you.
Hi, Jen. How are you? It's great to see you too. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, Ariel and Brand Innovators. I'm super excited to meet with Jennifer face to face, I can say, right? Over this virtual world that we're now living in, and have a conversation about, why it's so important to bring on, yes, they are amazing earrings, why it's so important. For us to talk about, continue the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I shared the other day that it's really important that we continue the conversation, because that's the only way that we can truly ensure that this path, this trajectory that we're on in creating change will actually continue to happen. So I'm really pleased to have Jennifer here with us, who's the head of talent, brand, global marketing, events, and communications for Discover Financial Services. Jen, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our team here.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. And it's so great to be here with you. It's so great to see you. And I first want to just thank Brand Innovators and this amazing community for having us on today and continuing to really support and focus on this topic. It is such an important one. And as Vanessa and I were talking about the other day, I can't think of a better community to be able to share this topic with, because it's an open community. We are very honest with each other. And, this is definitely a topic that can make a lot of people uncomfortable, right? There's a lot of emotion wrapped in it. And so, I definitely want to just encourage everyone out there that, this is a safe space. Please ask us questions, share comments with us. We want to really have an open dialogue and dig deep into this topic so that we can help push it forward, like Vanessa said. And so, as Vanessa mentioned, I run Employer Brand at Discover, and I've been in marketing for about 20 years, the last few years on the employer brand side. And I feel so fortunate to have made the leap to this side because, this is such an incredible time to be really at the intersection of consumer brand and employer brand. There's never been a better time. And so for those of you who are not familiar with employer brand, our work is really dedicated to sharing employee stories, talking about the value proposition that we have as an employer, and attracting candidates. And a big part of that is attracting diverse candidates. So I have a team focused on diversity, talent, and attraction. And we really focus on sharing stories of our employees. So that's a little bit more about me, Vanessa.
I love that. So we discovered in a kind of a pre-conversation that both Jen and I have strong marketing backgrounds. And I was sharing with her, how important it's been for me over the last few years to infuse the two passions that I have. One, definitely in the marketing and strategy space, integrated marketing as a whole, but also the passion I have for really helping people from the perspective of inspiring and motivating them to really be their authentic selves and live their best lives, to quote my old boss, Ms. O. But in trying to get into this field, it was very challenging because I have a traditional marketing background. And so as we start talking about, attracting talent, I'd love to hear your POV on what it's like to bring in someone who has a traditional marketing background into the space where we're really focused on community and work culture and diving a little deeper into DE&I.
Yeah, such a great question, Vanessa. And as we talked about, I thought you had such a great point that as marketers, we are in a unique position to really help push this conversation forward because of the work we do to truly understand consumers and understand kind of what's happening from a cultural perspective. So in coming into this work, I think, really the first piece of it, and as we've seen, the companies that are really been getting a lot more accolades for the work and activity they're doing around diversity and inclusion. It's really always starts with the values, right? The company values. And that's such an incredible part of why people join a company and why consumers choose you, right? And so in thinking about those values and from the perspective of Discover, this past year, we have really strong values. And this past year, our leaders took it to really overtly articulate those again and ensure that all of our employees understood those. So, we're focused on openness, on respect, on doing the right thing. And we wanted to make sure that for our employees that those values were articulated and that we started to create a safe space for our employees to be able to have conversations. And, again, I think as we talked about the other day, like, the importance of having psychological safety for your employees and for your teams to be able to start to have these conversations and talk about where we have biases in our systems, both internally, but then also thinking about where we could be doing a lot more for our communities. And so I think you shared that great list of some brands that are doing some great work. And I don't know if you'd feel comfortable just sharing, who you think right now has been doing a good job at sharing their values and their commitment.
Yeah, that's a great question. Some of the brands that I've worked with in the past, I feel truly exemplify what it means to have a workspace that speaks to values both inwardly and outwardly. One of them is Procter & Gamble. I've always respected the brand, worked with them in the past, and saw how all of the employees that I've worked with truly exemplify the value of community and teamwork, both as it related to their own jobs and then as it relates to the communities outside of their world, and really empowering them and supporting them, particularly underrepresented communities. And I think that's, what's really important here as we're talking about brands is, kind of taking a look at where they can serve others. Probably one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King is it's not what the world has done for you, but what you've done for others, to paraphrase. And so I kind of live my life through that lens of what I've done for others. And I think that P&G is one of those brands who really puts that filter on the things that they do. Aside from serving their consumers, they're absolutely serving their community. General Motors is another brand, Old Navy, even Yelp. I think that a lot of these brands have been doing this for years. The ones I'm really proud of are the ones that have stepped up to the plate this year, though, seeing the value. I mean, we have to acknowledge what a crazy year and a half this has kind of been for us, going through the pandemic and the racial tensions. So when we talk about how consumers really attach to brands that have a POV, I think this year has really been a huge stress test. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I think it definitely for organizations has been a big stress test, how they've supported their employees through the pandemic, and then also how they've articulated their stance on the systemic racism and injustices that we've seen. And the brands that aren't just, as you said, like it's not just about the words, but it's about the actions they're doing. It's about how are they, championing diverse voices, both internally and externally, and how are they supporting those communities? And there's one thing, that I wanted to share that we're doing at Discover. And then I also wanted to, Vanessa, just talk about like your work at Ben, because you, especially, talking about, really championing diverse voices, you do such great work at Ben. And I think I definitely want to dig into that with you. But at Discover this past year, for us, we did have commitments, monetary commitments to communities. We had a campaign that really focused on giving back to Black-owned restaurants during the pandemic, during a time when we saw our restaurants all over the country shuttering because of just what was happening. But then we also this past year, and really where, a project that I've had the opportunity and to be so grateful to be a part of is we actually are providing jobs back into the community, and opened up a new customer care center on the south side of Chicago in the Chatham area, and are really focused on being a good community partner. And so really doubling down on the efforts and activities we already had and saying, how can we give back more? And it's monetary, but it's also commitment and being in the communities and a partner in the communities. And so in creating jobs. So I'd love to hear, Vanessa, would you share a little bit more about the work that you're doing with Ben? Because I think everyone would love to hear more about that.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. First of all, I love what Discover is doing in the community. That is something that we pride ourselves at Ben as well, being very focused on the community at large, and focusing on different diversity segments as well. As I mentioned before, many companies have been doing this for quite some time now, just amplifying our efforts. So to that end, at Ben, we both focus on influencers and content creators and storytellers, and integrating brands into these stories in very organic ways, right? So, but one of the things that we have the opportunity to do here is to really position some of our diverse storytellers, right? And the ones that come from, different segments. I think that for us, lifting the diverse voices in Hollywood it's important because it reflects the conversations that are happening in many homes across America, and beyond America, to be frank. And we see that in the way how our content travels and how global content travels to the United States as well. But in amplifying these diverse voices, what we're finding is that we are actually empowering storytellers that potentially might not have had an opportunity to get some of their work across the finish line. Why? Because brands are investing in their storytelling by just simply creating campaigns through Ben and creating opportunities to provide financial support and support through products that help to really bring these stories to life and make them real. I think one of the things I hate the most seeing is like if someone's drinking like a can of beer or a can of soda and it just says pop on the side of the can, like that's not real life to me. Like it's great to see that someone is drinking Coca-Cola or someone is drinking Mountain Dew, you know. Those are real life brands, and so to be able to bring them to life through story and to be able to utilize that as a tool to empower diverse storytellers is something that I think is very special about the work that we do at Ben. And I actually am hoping that we get to take it one step further, because work like what you do and work like what P&G does in terms of really focusing on the community, sometimes that wonderful work does not get seen by consumers, you know? And because we do know that consumers tend to favor brands that have a POV and that are aligned with community work, I think it would be great to find ways to organically integrate those stories of the wonderful work that you're doing within the storytelling. Because at the end of the day, the producers, the writers, the directors, they all have the power to create some really amazing narratives.
I couldn't agree more. And, it again goes back to like that intersection where, consumers are really looking at brands and they want to see themselves in the work. They want to know the commitments that they have. And then they will also want to understand, that it's long-term, right? That this is sustainable. And it's long-term commitments that they're making. And so I think that's super important. And, at Discover, my team really focuses on celebrating and giving the microphone to our employees and sharing their stories. And, we would love to have every single employee at our company actually share their stories, because there's so many different aspects of diversity. And so obviously, like we really focus on race and ethnic identification and gender identification, but there's so many intersections to that, right? And just each story, I think, helps people, start to really understand, is there truly belonging in this company? Like, do people truly feel like they can be themselves, they can be honest? And so that's kind of the mission that we're on. And I know we share that passion of just celebrating and championing stories from diverse communities, as well as just from diverse from our colleagues and the content creators that you work with. So
yeah. I love how you touch on company values. I mean, I think one of the things that attracted me to Ben as an employer is the fact that they really do truly present themselves company value first. Like, I think that when I met the organization as a candidate, that was the one thing that struck a chord with me. The fact that I met them and I saw them from their simplest forms in terms of values, and then backed out to what the business looks like, and how you manifest those values through the business. So I really would like to talk a little bit more about company values, because I think you and I are both seeing that as you're looking at bringing talent into the workforce, that this is something that continues to be increasingly important.
that are graduating from university now, over 70% are really digging into a company's commitments to DE&I. They want to understand, what does their representation look like now? What are their goals for the future? So it's incredibly important, and it has to be real. They truly want to see and the authenticity, the honesty of where people are in the journey. I think that just being honest about kind of where people are on their journey and the commitments that they're making for the long term, I think are incredibly important. And I think, going back to some of the examples that you were talking about, we see companies like Target that are talking about their long-term goals. They have short-term goals, but they're also talking about the long-term goals, goals of 2025, that they're giving $2 billion. They want to, focus on Black-owned businesses in their stores and retail. So, back to your point, that is the ethos of a company, and that permeates out in terms of how they are seen by consumers, and it's critical. And the companies that I think have been less vocal, I think that's okay that they're figuring it out, right? And hopefully they're doing that from a true place of learning and understanding within their organizations. I think that's so important. And so one other thing I wanted to ask you about, Vanessa, because it is such a passion of mine, and I think so important in this conversation, is the topic of sponsorship, and not just having mentors that help you, but you had shared a story when we were catching up before that really resonated with me, on just in terms of how passionate you are about this work, and how, as you shifted into this work, hearing, well, you don't have experience in this work, you're not, you haven't been doing this for the last 10 years, and that Ben, has given you an opportunity to really focus and drive this work forward at the organization. And it just got me thinking about how important sponsorship is, right? Because it's not just about, being able to see people like you within a company is so important, but it's also the people who are sitting at that table when the doors close and are going to advocate on your behalf and really believe in you, and that we have those sponsors. So I'm just curious. I don't know if you'd want to share a little bit more about your story, but how what you think about sponsorship and in context of this conversation.
Wow. That's such a great question for me in particular, because diversity comes into play here. I started my career long ago. I won't say how many years ago, but when I did, about a quarter of the way into my career, I had someone who looked at me and saw potential. And at that time, when you look at the different diversity segments, a lot of people think, well, it's gonna be that Black woman who sees you from above and helps to, lift as she's climbing. In my case, it was this wonderful guy who is now still one of my dearest friends. His name is Tim Rasta. And he was on the board, or is on the board, for Staying Alive, and worked as a VP of integrated marketing in MTV. And Tim really put me in places that I was not used to being. And it's funny because in those places I had an opportunity to be my authentic self. I'm talking about being that lone, Black face in a room with CMOs, with CEOs, with, and really feeling sometimes like, wow, I'm really the only face in here. But at the same time, feeling empowered because I had someone behind me who believed in me, and who continued to push me forward because he saw, the passion and the talent within me. I've taken that approach myself, by making sure that I look back and pull others with me. Have been blessed to have some amazing mentees that I've seen grown in their career. Some of them have even gone far surpassed me, but that's fine, because the fact of the matter is that they're doing the same thing that I did. They saw the value of what I did. I saw the value in what Tim did. And now there's a group of young, fresh, underrepresented voices that I, can be proud to say that I've had an opportunity to help usher in through my own personal work and then through the work of the people who I've inspired and pulled along with me. It's so important. That's when, when we talk about representation mattering, it's not just seeing the face, but it's actually people peeling back the layers, all those intersectional layers, and looking at each other human, eye to eye, and seeing who we are at the core, and seeing the value of who we are at the core, and really pulling someone along. It's so important.
It really is. And that's why I feel so grateful for the work and being part of doing employer brand work now, because, it starts with our hiring process. It starts with our development programs, and really ensuring that we are creating, changing our processes, changing our approach to that. And I think as marketers, as you said before, that we are ensuring that we are creating a team that is able to, that feels comfortable sharing their different points of view, that are bringing different skill sets and are bringing different, backgrounds and experiences, because that's how we create such stronger content and work. And so thank you for sharing that story. And I think I'm sure that resonated with so many, because we remember those people, remember the people that were there for us and that bet on us and bet on our potential, and remember the people that didn't, and just how important it is, as you were saying, to give back, and that every aspect of that counts. Like one conversation counts and helps to, really lift someone up, especially if they're in a time that, they're just, especially, and you also brought this up, Vanessa, when we were catching up, just, having this conversation as we're, kind of closing out Mental Health Awareness Month. And, at such a time where we all do need more support, and seeing the leaders that are being really honest and open about what they need, and giving their teams permission to also feel comfortable sharing that.
That's a really great point, because I think that is the setup for how I ended up in this role. So as much as I thank Tim for pulling me along the way, I wouldn't be where I am, obviously, without him. But our CEO at Ben, Ricky Ray Butler, and also Erin Schmidt, who's my direct boss, both of them have truly empowered me and supported me along this journey. The fact that they took a chance on me, the fact that they believed and that they saw the passion that I brought to the table, not only for my work as a marketer and a strategist, but also for my community and for my coworkers and for my team. I mean, I just truly love my coworkers. It's almost a bit sickening how I am a cheerleader for a company and for the work that we do. But it's true. I mean, it's so important for a company to look at what their employees bring to the table besides the numbers and the spots and the dots, right? So you kind of, when you're looking at company culture and organizational culture, I think, one of the things that we note is that obviously everyone is here as a business, right? But you kind of have to take a step back and look and see where those organizational cracks are. What is it that is attracting talent to one company or one organization versus another? What is it that they're seeing that feels authentic and feels real? I know the way I talk about Ben, I've had several people come to me and say, hey, are they hiring? Which we are. But what do you think that, people are really looking for when they are looking into the next company that they want to spend a lot of their time with?
You're absolutely right, Vanessa. Because we spend more time with our colleagues and at work than a lot of times with our own family. And so it has to be the right fit. And what's been really interesting about doing this work is articulating culture is such a hard thing. And that's why, being able to see fit and having that friction of this is what we stand for, this is our values, and this is what we're not, I think is important for companies to be able to do, so that candidates can really kind of select into that, because through the process, it becomes so transactional. It's so much about like, these are the skills we're looking for. This is the type of background we're looking for. Do you fit? Or in taking assessments and all that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, the person that's going to be successful has value alignment, as you were saying before. And, this past year, I had the fortune just this other week to hear Heidi Brooks, who is a lecturist at Yale, who's written a lot of articles about organizational culture, about organizational change, and in particular through this time of how this whole past year has been a stress test for them. And to your point, it has really shown the impact of the cracks in their systems and their approaches, how they approach hiring, how they approach retention, how they are providing a culture where people do feel like they belong or don't. And even I think as we think about, going back into the offices and what this new model is going to look like, having truly understanding employees and where they're at and meeting them where they're at is going to be so important, because everybody's going to be at a different place. And the companies that aren't going, just kind of have a one size fits all approach to how they're going to treat their employees, we're going to see mass exoduses. And, already I'm starting to hear that. I don't know if you are, from friends who are feeling that and stressed about, well, wait a second, I still have to care for my elderly parents. Like, our situation changed. It's been a year and a half. Right. And so there's so much in this. And I think it's been an important stress test for organizations to really focus on their, really articulating what's important to them and where they want to be in the world. What is the place that they want to play for in society, both as a company, as an employer.
So you bring up, you mentioned retention, which I love that you mentioned that, because that is something that a lot of people are thinking about as there have been mass exoduses. And now as we're beginning to bounce back, there are opportunities for employment at different companies. So you kind of have to take a look at, like, what are these benefits? How are you, how is the company that you're working with really providing a support system? And I think, and how are they looking into the psychological health of their employees? As we mentioned, we are at the end of Mental Health Awareness Month. And the last year that we've gone through obviously has not only been a stress test on organizations, but on people as well, as they look to rebalance their life. And now that we're going back into, a lot of people are going back into offices and back into hybrid models. And there are a lot of questions. Like, I saw an article the other day, if you thought working from home was messy, wait till you start hybrid work. And so, the stress of just like going back into the office, managing your workflow, taking care of your family members that kind of started to depend on you now to be in the home, it's really, I think a lot of things are going to come into play when you look at retention. And one of that, as I mentioned, is like the psychological help. So what would you recommend for companies that are looking to provide the best benefits that they can in that space to their employees?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is such a topic that's close to my heart, because I do think that employees' needs have changed. And as an employer, and this is where, again, I think culture and values come in, it's so important. Do you understand? Do you know what your employees need? Are you listening to them? Are you hearing them? And thinking about that in context of business, of course. But, certainly for a business like Discover, our employees are the business, they really are. It's the experience that we create for our customers. And so if we're not supporting our employees and they're not happy, we're not going to be successful. So, I think, to your point, really thinking about, and especially as a mother and as a working mom, I think I'm scared about some of the gaps we still have with childcare, and you're mentioning taking care of elderly parents, that's still something we haven't solved for. And so I think companies need to get a little creative and think about what are some other aspects of benefits that they could potentially give to their employees to help support them through this transition. And so, we're very much still in the beginning of this journey, but for our agents, our customer service agents, and we have over 5,000 of them, we are offering complete flexibility. They can work from home. They can be part-time in the office. They can be part-time at home, and they can really choose that flexibility. We're giving complete flexibility to our employees because we do want to meet them where they're at. And we realize that they've been successful at home. And if that's the model that fits them and they're going to be happier there, we want to support that. But those, the individuals that do want to be back in an environment that they can be, with each other, we want to be able to support that as well.
Great points. And yeah, I've definitely seen some companies that are looking forward or leaning into a hybrid model or a work from home, or I think there was one like that there was like no real rule per se. You could just choose to work from home if you wanted to. So kudos to the companies that are really, opening the door and are listening. I think we talked about that a little bit. Like, listening is so important. Deep listening is so important. Yesterday I had the opportunity to participate in an empathy workshop that I brought in to my company as a part of our DE&I program. And this was focused on leadership. And one of the great things that I saw was that it felt as though the leadership team, they were really listening to each other, but it was in a much more intimate way and I think it possibly was because we weren't necessarily talking about the numbers of it all, but we were talking about the feelings. And I think one of the best things that I saw that came out of that workshop was I saw one of my coworkers who I've always felt like, kind of looked like you couldn't tell like if he was really happy or if he was just okay. I saw a bit of vulnerability in him yesterday that made me respect him 10 times more than I already had, because through that empathy workshop, we had, an opportunity to see the real him outside of, the work that he brought to the table. I think it's something that is critical as we're moving into this next phase of what working from home and what life looks like for our employees. Like, how are we being empathetic? How are we listening to them? How are we understanding what they're saying and taking some action steps that will help make their work life better?
Absolutely, Vanessa. And I would just adding on that point, and I think it's amazing that you did that. You brought in, you did an empathy session for your leaders. I mean, that's incredible. I think and I see there's a question in the chat just about kind of where to start with some companies that haven't done a lot in this area. I think that's exactly it. And I would also say that companies that don't have the resources internally to do this, right? Like, they don't have the teams, they don't have the expertise to bring in experts and to allow kind of a third party, unbiased. I was hearing from a friend about, their company, they brought in a psychologist to be on staff with them through this past year. And really facilitated a lot of open conversations with their employees to really try to create more of that, safety and that openness. So I think that is where it starts, because you're not going to know the true depths of issues or where there's opportunity to really make change in a company without understanding and without really getting to. And, there was a question that I had heard about, what is not safe to talk about here, right? And that's a scary question to ask. And are we comfortable? Is that even, are people going to even answer that, right? And so if people don't answer that question, oh God, we have a lot of work to do. So I think it's such a great point, and just starting to open up that dialogue and allowing people to understand that there's a lot of emotions wrapped up in it, but it's okay. And that we come curious. We're curious about people's different experiences and want to learn. I think that's the best place to start.
I'm glad that you said that, curious about experiences and wanting to learn. And kind of, I want to touch back really quickly before we dive into some questions about experiences and how important it is to share them, because we do come from all different backgrounds. So my company, we have a ton of people from Provo, Utah, Los Angeles. We have offices in New York, Shanghai, London. I'm working out of Miami right now, or close to Miami. So when you look at people coming from all different places and the different personalities they bring into the workplace, I think the workplace is now more open more than ever to have these very important and very difficult conversations. And I appreciate that I happen to work at a workplace that understands that and empowers me to help lead in some of that discussion and bring them to the forefront. I think that when we start to understand different backgrounds, we start to understand what makes people think and work in the manner that they do. And I think, it's so important now more than ever that that organizations invest back into their employees in that way, because investing into your employees is really investing into the business. So, and I'd love to hear your point of view on just what kind of investment you think businesses need to make to the into their employees.
Yeah, absolutely, Vanessa. And I would say, one thing we're doing at Discover, and I'm hopeful that there's other companies, that are doing this. But first, understanding the differences in the employee experience across different groups, especially our underrepresented minorities at the company. How is their experience different? What are those differences, to really start to paint a picture of where we have our deepest work to do. And so I would say that that's kind of the starting point, right? Like, you have to first understand the elements of that. You can't just expect to know that. It really takes time to start to diagnose where the opportunities within your organization lie, where there's opportunity to really dig in and do the deep work. And then, I think also we've seen this past year that organizations are focusing on this. They're putting teams together, they're putting task force together, they're thinking about both the internal components of it and then also what they're going to be doing externally. And so I think also starting to really outline those long-term goals and showing your employees progress. I think that's the other big thing, right? Like, we have these longer-term goals. What is the progress we're making towards those? And how can we continue to be part of that conversation, keep the conversation going, and just really, cultural change, organizational change of any kind is can be challenging, and it's definitely nuanced, but certainly this type of change in terms of practices and how we work is the biggest.
Yes, and I think, as I lead into this next question, I think when we start looking at our brand partners or our agency partners, right? I think a lot of us like to align ourselves with agencies and partners that have very similar philosophies and a very similar DNA in that sense, right? So we do have a question here that kind of speaks to that. I just before I get to it though, I do want to touch on the fact that it's so great when you do have the opportunity to work with brands like that. And so I'm consistently seeking, brands that have that similar DNA to Ben, so that we can align ourselves in and make the commitment that we're making to the community that much stronger, because it's their, ability to empower, our ability to connect them to storytellers that can really, because I do believe in the power of storytelling and how it has the ability to change things, that can really make some stories enriched, right? And so as and a lot of brands are asking for this. They're asking to connect to diverse content creators. How is Discover benchmarking the DEI data of their existing marketing agencies? This is a question that came in from Dave Edwards.
Yes, thank you for the question, Dave. So Supplier Diversity has been an initiative at Discover for a while, but in this past year, we've actually dedicated more resources to really focusing and auditing our partners, and exactly what you're talking about, Vanessa, just really looking at when we're going to the market for a new partner or a new activity, that we are handling that in a way that we can truly get strong representation and focus on various types of companies, and we're not just kind of always going back to that same supplier list. So that's been a big effort of ours, and I'm so proud of the team that's been working on that, because for example, with our new customer care center, our Chatham Center, we focused on wanting supplier diversity through that, and in particular ensuring that we were choosing companies to support our efforts in the community, that it wasn't just about Black-owned businesses, but it was also about businesses in the community that were already there, that were already doing work. So great question, and it's something that I think is really top of mind for us.
That is, definitely a great question. Another one that we've got here is from Marcella. And Marcella's question is, how can we help guarantee that investments in our employees continue to happen moving forward after COVID-19 hopefully gives us a real break?
Great question, Marcella. Thank you for that question. I would say that, again, it goes back to, for employees, things have changed, and they're going to have a different perspective on the work-life balance that they need in terms of physically being in an office and where they feel comfortable doing work. And so I think, companies have to really start by understanding, what does that look like? When we were doing surveys at Discover, the majority of employees said they still wanted to have flexibility. They still wanted the opportunity to work from home when they wanted, right? And so our leadership team is taking that into account and thinking about that in context of the work and the different areas of the business, because it is hard, right? There's different areas where collaboration and in-person collaboration can really drive innovation more quickly. And so what are some of the tools that we need to be able to continue to create that if we're not always in the same environment? And I think especially for global companies, they've been doing this for years. And so, who's doing it well? How can we continue to learn from them?
Great answer. Thank you so much, Jen. This has been an amazing conversation. And I think the best part about it was that I think I have found someone who I can look forward to connecting with after this is all done for some mentorship. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Same, Vanessa. I look forward to catching up with you.
Absolutely.
Well, with that, I appreciate you both. So thank you for coming onto the stage and fostering such important conversations today. It's so needed within the brand community, and can't wait to see you back soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, moving on to the last and final session of the day, we have another group of amazing speakers for you all. Please welcome Lauren Rotolo, the Director of Creative Partnerships at the Global Content Lab with Johnson & Johnson, moderated by Christina Malone, the Global Head of Inclusive Design and Digital Accessibility at Wunderman Thompson. Welcome.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Lauren. So nice to see you.
It's so nice to see you again.
So where are you? I see these trees, and this does not seem like New York.
No, it's not. I flew out to Los Angeles last night.
Love it.
So I have not left the state of New York, or really the island of Manhattan, for, I guess, 15 months.
Wow. Okay. So this is something to celebrate. So thank you for spending your vacation with us. I'm so excited to have you here, and would love if you could talk a little bit about your background to the audience if they're maybe not familiar with you?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I am Lauren Rotolo. I am currently the Director of Creative Partnerships and Production for Johnson & Johnson, and I sit within their enterprise. I'm also the author of a book called Unstoppable in Stilettos and a disability advocate, and I write a weekly blog now around what it's like to be disabled, living in Manhattan and living in the world today.
Yeah, no, it is definitely a struggle sometimes being a disabled person in Manhattan. Both my arms are paralyzed, and just getting around a city that probably wasn't really designed with us in mind.
Not at all.
And it's really interesting. I would love to kind of understand with your day-to-day job, how are you guys ensuring your content is accessible? Because I feel like everybody's living in such a digital world on their phones, especially during COVID. So we'd love to see how are you taking your lived experience and making that reflected in the content at J&J?
So what I think at Johnson & Johnson, well, first and foremost, is that we are for our people, for our planet, and for the world ultimately. And so everything we do has the minds of our employees and our patients. And so whether it be our content that's on our website to the videos, I head up all of our videos. We're really always thinking about what's in it for the patient and what's in it for the consumer. And so when we speak about disability, you know, like everything from our website and everything that we do is ingrained in our credo. And so again, like we're always thinking about what is that experience that the patient will have, whether they're at our website, whether they're watching our videos, whether they are using one of our products. And so I think it's also ever changing too, constantly. And so we try to, we always put on that lens of health first and foremost. And so, you know, from our site being ADA compliant to, you know, now that I head up video, I'm very cognitive of, you know, that we do have either burned in captions and or captions, and, you know, really trying to describe as well as we can with what the platforms give us, you know, what is the person wearing? How are they, you know, what is their action that's taking place? I think that, you know, as far as video, it's probably the easiest to do it through the words and through a video. So we're really always trying every day to, especially, you know, me, I'm always thinking about what is that audience first and foremost.
Yeah, I know. And I love that. And it's so interesting and so important for you to do that because you are providing healthcare information. You're not just providing, you know, gossip or things like that. And having that accessible to communities really provides that equity that the disability community is looking for, and that many brands aren't doing.
No, I think that it's, you know, and what I have been really trying to get out there is that we are this, you know, we're the largest and most diverse community in the world, but we've been silent for so long. So it's almost like we're invisible. You know, people see, if you have a physical disability, people see it. I have this feeling that they become a little bit afraid of it because could that happen to me? Could that not happen to me? You know, of course, we don't want anybody to ever become disabled, but if it does happen, there's a whole world that you can live inside. And so I think it's really important now, and what I've been speaking about is how do you turn this invisible community to be invincible? Because no one has really spoken to them. You know, there really and truly hasn't been this moment and a movement, anything that has really spoken to give this community a hands up to make them loud and make them proud and hire them and have fashion for them and, you know, see them on television, see them in the movies. So I'm hopeful that we are getting there. And I know that the voices are becoming definitely more distinct. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think people avoid people with disabilities because they don't want to offend them. And it's this internal scareness that's going to happen to them. But I think, Lauren, you and I and many people in the community have proved that you can have very aspirational lives when you're disabled.
Yes.
And I bet there's so many people jealous of you right now, looking so great and being in LA. And that's what we need to show on screen. And I think, you know, me being at WPP, one of the biggest creative houses, and J&J being one of the largest healthcare companies, that we have this ability to make this change. And I think, you know, being in the digital sphere, people are starting to have voices that maybe didn't have the platforms before.
Absolutely. You know, and I think that social media, like you said, you know, social media and technology has really given us a platform to speak our minds, and not only to speak our minds, but actually show who we are and how we do things every day. Because I think that people, again, they're like, I get so many questions on the street. I don't know if you do, Christina, but my disability, you know, I'm 4'0". I walk with 4 on crutches, and I wear stilettos and or platform shoes almost every day. And I did still wear platforms, whether it be sneakers and or sandals during quarantine in my apartment. But people are constantly trying to ask me things that I just call it like a special kind of stupid, because I'll be wearing, let's just say, what I think is like a great workout outfit, and I'm going to Pilates, or I'm going where just to get coffee, and maybe I'm in workout clothes, and they'll be like, oh my God, can you work out? And you're like, yes, can you? Like, I'm not asking you that question. Why are you asking me? And you're asking me because I look different than you. But I think it's time to say that we're all part of one community, and that we can do the same things that you can do. Yes, we adapt to it, but let us adapt to it. You don't have to bring that forth.
Totally. And I think that's a really good point about messaging, because we see online of the viral post of the boy that took the girl with Down syndrome to prom. And you're kind of like, well, if she didn't have Down syndrome, that, you know, video or photo would never go viral. We need to stop kind of this inspiration porn of this specialness, that you're freaking out if someone is doing something quote unquote normal that has a disability. And I think the Pilates example is so true.
Right. Oh, I mean, and it's constant. And I think that, you know, you see it whether you'll be on the streets of Manhattan or in the workforce too. Like, you'll see it on the streets, and you'll also see it in a boardroom or in a conference room. People are still uncomfortable, and they don't know how to speak to you, or your disability speaks before you do, because that's what walks into the room. My disability walks into the room. I walk with it, and I am the person holding it, the disability, but no one seems to think about that. So a lot of times our words kind of get misconstrued because they're so focused on what's on the outside, and that maybe I can't reach this, or that I can't run, or I can't take a hike, or I can't ski, or I can't do that. Why don't you just be focused on Lauren as a person and what she brings to the table, or what Christina brings to the table, versus worrying about these, because this is just a form of transportation that gets me from A to B. And if, you know, and so I just really think that people just, they need, and it needs to shine a light.
Definitely. And I think that is probably rooted just in this place of fear. And what people need to understand is everyone will become disabled at some point in their lives. And
whether you break a toe or a leg.
Yeah, you can be temporarily disabled, permanently disabled, and it's nothing to fear, because it gives you these great opportunities to live life a different way, and then to meet different people. I felt like when I became disabled, this like, you know, carpet or blanket that was over my face the whole entire life was just ripped off. And seeing the world so differently. was kind of a blessing. I mean, yes, I'm frustrated when I can't open, a bottle, or I can't, grab a moisturizer or something like that. Yeah, totally. But those problems can be easily hacked.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anything can be hacked. I mean, you can't open up a bottle. I can't reach to get something. I can't, I can't run. I can't walk. I can't do certain things. And we all, like you said, will feel disabled at one point. Everybody who gets older feels disabled. There's something. Anytime you take away anything from you that doesn't give you the ability to do something, you are disabled.
And I think what's been interesting in COVID, as we reflect on what's currently going on now, is that not being able to go out of your house or to be able to go to the gym or the store, people were starting to really feel like what we feel, is that not having places to be accessible, how much that hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, it's an experience to be had.
And it's such a good point. Something that got me so agitated was that people were saying, I have pandemic fatigue. I can't go out. I can't go to the movies. I can't go to a restaurant. I can't go. Well, when you're disabled, you don't have the opportunity to be fatigued. So like you said, like it kind of gave people a chance and a forfeit into who we are and what we experience every day, because something has been taken away from us. Yes, it was awful, and everything that came with it was awful, but think about it. It was a moment in time, and yes, it's still happening in various parts of the world, and it's absolutely awful, but just think about what you're saying before, because you don't have the option to go to a concert, or you don't have the option to go to your family's house, or whatever it is. Imagine never being able to do that again, ever. So you really don't get that option to be fatigued. And then you have to work through that fatigue and say, okay, well, here's then that new path that I'm going to go down.
Totally. And I think what's interesting, there was a study done to understand, what does exclusion feel like? And the same part of your brain that goes off when you're excluded is the same part that goes off when you're physically hurt.
Wow.
And people who are not disabled need to understand the hurt that they felt, or the anxiety that they felt from not being able to do something, can be controlled. And they need to ensure, when they're going back into their lives, or making experiences for customers, they need to understand what it feels like to be excluded. Because when I look at disability, I use it as the social model, which is, I'm disabled because this was not designed for me, or this, Sensodyne toothpaste top can't come off, so that makes me disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Or I put on deodorant. And I think, what do you think the role of brand marketers and designers have, and what is their responsibility to really designing for all?
I think that, to your point, brands and companies and advertising agencies, they have never truly thought about this community. They have never truly thought, no, I can't open that bottle of toothpaste, or no, I can't take off that cap for the deodorant, or no, I can't put on those jeans, or no, I can't walk up those steps, whatever it is, to get into a pool, or to get, because it's never been to the forefront. And so many of these campaigns and so many of these products are made in a room, right? I think we need to broaden our horizons and say, who exactly is my customer? And when you say Gen Pop is my customer, or women are my customer, well, women come in various different sizes. And if you're going to create something for a Latino audience, or a Black audience, or an LGBTQ audience, this audience needs to be included, because we are your same purchasers. We are your same video watchers. We are your same product buyers. And if you're not making it for us, then we're going to go somewhere else, because we're going to have to find it. Or like you said, we're going to create a hack. So I just think that there needs to be whether it be like a disability board or like the ADA has done a decent job, right? But there should be then the ADA for fashion, and there should be the ADA for products. And, I work in corporate America. Everything is a process. Everything has a check mark. You have to check this, you have to check that. Nobody has ever checked the box to say, can my friend Christina, who doesn't have use of her arms, use this product? Or does, I can't hear this a certain way. No one has ever thought about that. So there really should be a checks and balances list. I was doing this talk last week and we were talking about fashion. And I just said, well, I have never been able to walk into a store, buy a pair of shoes, buy a pair of jeans, buy a dress that I haven't had to fix, right? I haven't had to take to the tailor. I haven't had to go to the children's side of the store to buy a pair of shoes or a pair of sneakers. There should be a tailor. We just need to start thinking about inclusivity and what does that really mean? You can't have inclusivity without including this audience. Even if it's not fully mass market, that's okay. But not everything needs to be all the time. But you do need to think about it. And so I am all about bringing and creating a checks and balances for every single brand out there. We're constantly making models as brands, right? A disabled man and woman with various different disabilities should be part of your modeling.
Totally. And it's really interesting because in my night in the weekends, I co-run an incubator at Open Style. It's called Open Style Lab. We started at MIT, now at Parsons. And we really push in this, it's 30 years after the ADA, but there are no rules around fashion. There's not even sizing for people that have different bodies. And what I've been trying to do at Wunderman Thompson is say, hey, brands, this is how you do inclusive design. Apply it to all of your products. Because you're right, it really is kind of just a checklist.
It is.
And it's very black or white. It's very easy.
So there really should be just this checklist, and every single brand should have to check it off, and they won't be able to get into market unless they actually check it off. Not to say that everybody has to use it, but you know what? What's easier for you and I is also going to be easier for your average consumer, right?
Totally. So, think of touchscreen, that was created for someone with a disability and now is used by all. Right.
So if we just think about that as we're just part of everybody else and there is this checks and balances, I think we should start it.
Listen, WPP, J&J, we'll get together, we'll make this list because it really doesn't exist. And if you think about it, humans are 99% similar. And we know what it's like to not be as tall as things are made or to have no use of your arms. And the roles are out there and the people have that lived experience of getting everyone together to create that. Because I think that's interesting. And as we're on a, brand innovators talk, it is a way to innovation. I heard that 1.7 times more innovative if you are inclusive. So if everyone's about innovation, inclusion seems like a really simple way to do it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, and I've been talking about this, I think that people want to be inclusive, but they don't really know how to ultimately define what does that mean because they're afraid too.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's not be afraid. I think that the pandemic has taught us so much, right? It has taught us that anything can happen at any time, that anybody can get anything at any time. And so I think that it's because we almost became this world for a moment in time where everybody was feeling the same thing. Imagine if we took the world and all those people in it and then started making things for everybody. I mean, it would just be a better world that we live in. And we would put our products where our mouths are, or what we imagine what they should be or who they should be. And you would find, especially retailers or corporate market, they're always looking for new people to come into your stores, new shoppers, whether it be online or at retail. or new people to join the corporation. Imagine if you just opened up your mind and allowed these people like ourselves to come in and show you what we have to offer, or give us the buying power too, because we will buy your product. It's such a misnomer to not speak to this community, because there's so many of us.
And I heard a stat, the disposable income of the disability community is $8 trillion. So if we want to do a comparison set with what other group has $8 trillion of disposable income, all of China. So it is crazy when these brands have a business strategy for gaining sales in China, but no business strategy for, making their products more inclusive for the disability community. So it seems just like a miss.
Right, absolutely. Yes. And I just think it's time, and I think that we can't just blame the corporations out there. I think we also have to blame ourselves too, because what I have been saying, I was born with a disability, unlike you. And from day one, from the day that I was diagnosed at 18 months old, everybody has told me, no, Lauren, you can't do this. No, Lauren, you can't go here. No, you can't go in the kitchen because the floor is wet. No, you can't, whatever it may be. I have lived in this world of no. And I have also lived with a conversation that has mainly lived inside the doctor's office. So it's time that we take the conversation out of the doctor's office. It's time that we flip no on its head and say, yes, I'm constantly on. I'm going to do this. And, give us the opportunity to go to schools, give us the opportunity to get those jobs, give us the opportunity to create those brands, because once we start saying yes to ourselves, then I also believe that corporations will want to employ us, make products for us, put us in movies, put us in commercials, put us on the cover of Vogue, right? It's a combination. And so we need to give our community as much acceptance as possible to allow them to shine. And, stop being, I wrote this blog about taking risks. Well, I didn't really take a risk when I decided at 5 years old that I didn't want to sit in a wheelchair, because that was my trajectory. I was walking, then I wasn't, and then I was walking with a walker and a cane and crutches, and then it was ultimately going to be a wheelchair. And I decided at such a young age that wasn't my trajectory, because I knew in my heart and my mind how I saw myself, even as a child. And if we speak enough, I think that there will be enough of us to help shape the way we see ourselves in the future. And it's time to tell people, you know what, yourself, do what you can, be safe, of course, but your limits. I think that people don't understand that when we're disability, like, your limits on what you can and can't do. There shouldn't be somebody else to tell you that you can't do that. What you can and can't do. That is the easiest part of it. But the world wants to tell you no. When the world wants to tell you, no, we don't hire you. Well, they're afraid to hire you, so they just tell you no. So it's like, if we start saying yes to ourselves, then I think that the trajectory will change.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about really kind of self-talk most of the time, especially if you don't have a family, because there's different ways to raise kids with disabilities. And I've never raised a child with a disability, but I see the kids that, are somewhat coddled and their parents are so scared. So they don't know that they can do these things. And I think it's all about empowering people at all times.
100%.
And I think that if we add, people believing in themselves, and then we show more imagery of people with disabilities being successful, then the outside world will say no less.
100%. 100%. And, and it has to start with the doctors and the schooling system. I was constantly shoved into this bubble because I was in public school. No, I had to take a special bus. No, they wanted me in a special class. No, I had to have an aide. No, I had, all of these things, only because, once again, this was my mode of transportation, not because I couldn't do it because they thought I couldn't do it.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And it's super interesting as we look at systems today. It's like there still is a special entrance for people with disabilities that use wheelchairs. Like Glossier, it is interesting. Their New York location has a entrance in the back that's for wheelchairs. And the great thing about Glossier is the entrance when you walk in, it's beautiful. And it's kind of like we shouldn't have that split anymore, and we don't need to.
Right, of course. I mean, listen, I live in New York just like you. I'm constantly fighting with either the building that I'm living in or the restaurant that I'm going to, that why I can't walk down such a flight of steep stairs to go to the bathroom. Like, you shouldn't be allowed to open today. You shouldn't be allowed. Everybody should have the same entrance, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, like, didn't we try to get rid of that in the 50s with segregation? It's the same thing today. We're segregating this community by having them go in the back. Why should they have to go where the employees go to get to the front, back to the front of the store? It makes no sense. It's not a good experience. It doesn't make me feel like you want me to buy your product. Doesn't make me feel like you want me to work for you or whatever it may be. It's just, it's not a good experience.
Yeah, I agree. And what I try to push for when it comes to the product design aspect is like, let's try to create something that works for everybody.
Yeah.
That it's not a separate line. In cases, yes, if it's someone who uses a wheelchair and you have a certain cut of a jean that is for a seated position, okay, that's fine. But when it comes to, different products and different clothing, there's ways that we should be able to modular and make modular type things that work for everybody. Just kind of how like IKEA furniture is modular. Let's make clothes and products like that, because I feel like that's the way to fit all.
Absolutely. Oh my God, if we could do that. So if I could just take off one section of the pants, like the knee area, whatever it may be, to fit me because my legs are so short.
Yeah.
And it's like I have deformities in my hips and then deformities in my, so it's so hard to fit. So yes, modular. Yes. Please.
Yeah. I think, or different tops. Like if we look at like Neutrogena, for example, like what if we had the Neutrogena face wash in different bottle types that had grips on it maybe, and then you could have different heads and dispensers, all the same product.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
And I think once we get to a place like that, brands should be able to innovate more to provide that.
They absolutely should. And I think that it's also, yes, we're going to think about it, because thinking about it is very different than actually doing it. Because I mean, better than anybody how long it can take to get a product into market. If we don't start doing it today and or tomorrow, which could mean 18 months to be in the stores. So, how many 18 months do you want wasted where nobody can go and buy your product?
There's an urgency. And I don't think people understand that, beauty, personal care, fashion affects people that aren't able to have it because it's not made for them. And it's super important. I almost quit my job about 5 years ago because when I became, when my other arm went, I was like, I can't walk around New York without a winter coat. And then we were able to create a coat that I could put on by myself. But it's kind of like these things we don't think about.
Mm-hmm.
And brands don't think about.
No.
Could be life or death or between a job.
Oh, 100%. And it's also, there's that. And then there's, are you really hiring too? People like us too. Like, I have to say, I have probably never been in a job where I have seen 10 of me. If I saw 10 of me, oh my God, that would be amazing. I could host a table in the cafe, in the cafeteria, here's our section, everybody. We don't even I can't even fill a table. I want to be able to fill that table, people. We need to fill the table no matter where we are, whether we want to fill the table at retail or we want to fill it in the boardroom. We need to fill the table with people like us.
I couldn't agree more. And that's why I joined advisors to it's a LinkedIn for people with disabilities. And it's just kind of like, I'm so happy that I'm happy at WPP and Wunderman Thompson. But if I wasn't, I mean, it's so hard in interviews because our disabilities are pretty visible. People just think that you can't do the job.
100%. They don't even need to speak to you to think that. They just need to see you. And then your words, it's basically,
yeah,
not even listening to you at all. They're not hearing you. It's just this, like, they're like paralyzed almost with this fear that you are never going to be able to do it because your disability is always going to get in the way, and or you're going to be out of work more. And, you know, like, I've heard it all. When I first started my journey into the career place years and years ago, I heard, do you need special insurance? Do you need a special chair? You know, it wasn't like, so tell me about all your great experience that you've had. It was 100% concentrated on my disability.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with my experience. And I know today it still does. Like, I know in my heart that people are still afraid of it. Because if they weren't, there would be more people like us in the workplace.
Yeah.
There would be 30 of you right now trying to do what you need, and there's just not.
I agree. And I think also, which is really interesting, we probably know more disabled people at our companies if people felt okay talking about mental health.
Oh, absolutely. They don't. Again, it's just going to, I mean, again, they're scared. They're scared of it. Oh, we can't talk about this.
I know. It's crazy. And right now we're in a mental health crisis. People are having a very hard time. And it's just crazy that it's not talked about. And I think we can hopefully spark that within our organizations.
I really hope so. So we need a checklist. We need to get more people. We need to create our table. We have a lot to do.
I know, but it's all very exciting. I wanted to open up if there's any questions, as I always know that people have questions because we have pretty unique experience. And don't be shy, because this is very much it's an open place that we can talk about how we can help you or your brands.
Mm-hmm.
Inclusive. But I have a question, Lauren. How did you get into brand building and content?
So I started out my career in radio, and then I merged into, and then I worked for the Muppets.
That's amazing.
Exciting. Yeah. So actually, one of my first things out of college, one of my first product launches was Miss Piggy's Moi at Bloomingdale's.
Love that.
And it was just amazing when you got to work with the Muppets and just see how they come alive, right? But then I went into the magazine business and was in the magazine business for 17 years. So worked for TV Guide, helped transform and create tvguide.com, then helped transform the magazine from a digest size to a full size magazine. And then worked at Hearst magazine, so in fashion magazines for nearly a decade. And then just most recently moved over to Johnson & Johnson. And so, like, big brands has always been on my mind. How do we really make them? How do we make big brands attractive to our audiences? So, you know, whether it was in the magazine, whether we were attracting people to either subscribe and or buy our cover, to, you know, Johnson & Johnson today, where it's all about our brand reputation and how do we see the brand that we're connected to. That is you probably have 10 things of some of our brands in your bathroom, right? And so I've always thought about brands. They've always been on my mind on how do we make it a little bit sexier and how do we make it that everybody can understand who we're speaking to and what is that gravitas that we're giving brands. So I've always been a big brand girl and especially a magazine girl. There was nothing like just taking a hot bath and reading a magazine or like curling up into bed and reading a magazine.
Laying by a pool in LA.
Laying by a pool. They all have their computers.
Really?
No one's just sitting there and, they're all on their phone today. Like it's such a nice disconnect where you read a book or you read a magazine.
Not all those stupid alerts that you get on your phone.
Exactly. It's like, it's time to get off the Facebooks and everything in the world for that when you just need some peace.
Amazing.
We did have another question come in. This question is from Lauren Galanti. She is super appreciative of this discussion as a disabled professional in marketing. She wants to know, how does and will J&J use marketing to encourage inclusivity on the disabilities front?
So Johnson & Johnson has a quite a large scale ESG, and that's an employee service group. And they are right now working on every single level to make sure that people like me are part of their ads, not only their ads externally, but internally as well. So for example, our internal engagement group that speaks to our 136,000 employees worldwide, they know that I'm in this space of being a large scale disability advocate. They came to me and said, will you be part of our photo shoot? Will you be in our next ad that we're, going to speaking to employees, so I think it's a matter of that there's somebody like me and others like me inside the organization to showcase what it's like and that there needs to be inclusion. So we are working on it. You will see some new things coming out of J&J hopefully soon that does include more people with disabilities. So I'm excited. I have to say it's a wonderful company to work for. They really care about their employees. So when I am very active with my voice, they take action with that. Sometimes, listen, everybody and every brand still needs help, but, as you as an employee actually have a really strong voice. And if you voice your opinions, like I started voicing my opinion and all of a sudden I'm starting to get included and people are starting to include, what I'm talking about and then including more people like me. So I think that that's where we are. And that's, what I can say to Lauren is wherever you are in the world and whoever you work for, make it known and make your voice known, because once you do that, people will know and they'll start to respect your feelings and start to think about it. That's all we need to do. It's kind of like a TED Talk. You just need to turn the heads of somebody by 1%. You don't need to hone in it. Just have them turn their heads a little bit and say, I need to start doing that.
I love that. Thank you. That has been such a theme of the day, is trying to get internal approval on these types of initiatives, across the board on all fronts. So thank you. And thank you again. Christina, do you have any last thoughts or questions for Lauren?
Yeah, Lauren, I think it's just thank you for the work that you're doing. And I am excited to hopefully get together and get this checklist out so we can start.
Yes, let's do it.
Things to do.
Yes, there's an incredible company that everybody on here should know about. And I don't know, Christina, if you know about, it's called the Valuable 500.
Yeah, they're great.
They are, and they actually just reached, I am so excited that they just reached their 500th company that is willing to put disability on their board agenda.
Wow.
And so it's some of the top 500 companies in the world that are doing this. And so I don't think we'll rest to it's almost every single company out there, but they're definitely making waves right now. So it's exciting.
Yeah, make sure your brand is signing up to their pledge. It's important.
Yes.
super important. And Christina, I know you thanked Lauren, but I just want to thank you as well, because you both were super inspiring, informative, and just provided so many actionable ways that we can all get involved. And if there's anything the Brand Innovators community can do, please let us know, because we would love to be a part of your work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was so great to see you again, Christina. Let's definitely continue.
For sure. Hopefully buy a pool with a glass of wine.
Hopefully. Let's do it.
Definitely. Bye, guys, and thank you so much.
Bye. Happy Memorial Day, everybody.
So with that, we have just closed our entire summit today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we welcome you to join us next week for our virtual summit around digital future-proofing. We will be joined by marketing leaders from Walmart, TD Bank, 3M, Jellyfish, and